2024 has been an absolutely insane year for professional wrestling. We've seen many of our beloved figures of the past retire, some new figures come into the fold, and we've seen new champions crowned aplenty. And this year, the matches that we have witnessed have arguably been some of the best of any year in the history of professional wrestling. There are so many matches we could talk about, but in this video, we're going to focus on the 10 best matches in AEW, WWE, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, because that's really what I watch this year. Before we get into that, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I'm Omer Q for Real Take Wrestling. Let's dive right in. But before we do that, honorable mention to Io Sky versus Bayley at WrestleMania 40. Stephanie Vaquer versus Mercedes Moné at AEW Forbidden Door. And now let's move on and talk about the matches that made us say OMFG. Starting off the list at number 10, we have Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 40. Arguably one of, if not the biggest main events in the history of WrestleMania, the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns. A match that was destined to happen that almost didn't due to backstage shenanigans, but one that left us all saying, holy bleep, throughout. Now, while the wrestling in the ring kind of keeps this match from being rated higher on this list, it is undoubtable that the spectacle that was this match deserves to be a top 10 match. You not only had the crowning moment at the end of the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes finally winning for the first time in his career the WWE Undisputed Championship, but you also had in between several different story threads close. The thread between Jimmy and Jey Uso came to a head as they dived off the stage of WrestleMania. You had the story between Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, for at least the time being, come to a head as Rollins was able to provide a meaningful distraction that allowed Cody to pick up the victory. You had an eye-to-eye, face-to-face, nose-to-nose stare down between The Rock and John Cena. The Undertaker came out for no effing reason, but gosh darn it, it was cool. So much happened in this match that it is inarguable that this is one of the greatest moments, segments, and matches in the history of not just this year, but of WrestleMania itself. And that is why it is on this list. Now we move on to another match at WrestleMania 40. Number 9 on our list, we have Gunther versus Sami Zayn for the Intercontinental Championship. And I know what many of you are saying. What the hell is Gunther versus Sami doing above Cody versus Roman? Well, while Cody and Roman excelled at the spectacle that was that match, it is undoubtable that this match is the match of WrestleMania weekend, not only from an in-ring perspective, but also when you factor in the storyline elements going into it. Sami Zayn telling the story of Rocky being knocked down so many times and finally being able to come to the WrestleMania and face Gunther, the longest reigning WWE Intercontinental Champion of all time. He was Sami's Goliath. He was the monster that Sami needed to defeat, and he did. And on the way to doing it, they told an impeccable story through what they did in the ring. Gunther, the big monster, chopping Sami into oblivion, only for Sami to come back each and every time. Sami Zayn delivering an insane neck breaker onto the turnbuckle that really hurt Gunther in this match and allowed Sami to hit the haluva kick for the 1, 2, 3. You guys can say what you want, but for me and my money, and as an analyst looking at this objectively, the story, the match, everything was there to make this the match of WrestleMania weekend. Now we move on to number 8 on our list. We got to talk about Konosuke Takeshita versus Will Bloody Osprey at AEW Revolution 2024. Revolution 2024 is arguably one of the best shows of the year, and this match is a huge part of the reason why. You had Will Ospreay, Konosuke Takeshita, two of the highest up-and-coming stars in all of AEW, facing off, both members at this time of the Don Callis family, and both wrestlers seemingly looking to make their claim to the professional wrestling world. You had Takeshita, who is already coming off of multiple victories over Kenny Omega. You had Osprey, this was his first official AEW match. While he had matches in the company, this was his first foray as a full-time AEW talent. And there was no better way to introduce him to all of the AEW audience on a weekly basis than this match. And there was no better way you could argue to highlight Konosuke Takeshita than in this match. Action-packed, full of story, everything you could want. I don't even know how to honestly explain what this match was. You just got to go check it out after this video, to be honest. Next, let's move on and talk about number 7 on this list. We have Zack Sabre Jr. versus the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, at Wrestle Kingdom earlier this year. So much can be said about these two individually, but when they come together, it is always special. Whether it was at Wrestle Dream 2023, where I was at live in attendance, witnessing that insanely perfect match, or whether it was at Wrestle Kingdom, where the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, was defeated by Zack Sabre Jr. in one of the most insane displays of technical prowess I've ever seen in professional wrestling ring. There is a certain level of expectation that you would have for these two going into a match. However, I was blown away with what I saw. You had Zack Sabre Jr. and Bryan doing sequences and moves that we never thought were possible. Both of them lived up to the hype. They made this match live up to the hype, I should say, of being that between the two best technical wrestlers of our age. And in the end, the right guy won. Zack Sabre Jr. picked up the victory over Bryan Danielson, and we got this insanely cool moment at the end of them bowing at each other. And we saw Bryan Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr. giving some respect after a long, hard-fought rivalry, which everyone's waiting for the rubber match. Am I right? As we move on now to number 6 on our list, we got to talk about it. Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, the feud of the year in WWE for sure, arguably the feud of the year in all of professional wrestling. When these two first came mic to mic back in early 2024, and Drew McIntyre said, "I prayed for this and it happened," no one could have foreseen what would follow. And what did follow was one of the best and most well-told stories away from WWE TV. A lot of this was told by Drew McIntyre online. It was driven by Drew McIntyre online, and he did not disappoint. McIntyre came in and he said that he was going to make CM Punk's life a living hell, and he proceeded to troll him for as long as he was injured. And eventually, at a certain point, that got to Punk, and that led to Punk costing him the world title at Mania, costing him the world title at Clash of the Castle, and in the end, it led up to this culmination of their feud. They had 2 matches before this, but this was the rubber match. This was the big payoff, and it was also the return of Hell in a Cell. And I'm not just talking about Hell in a Cell, the match. I'm talking about Hell in a Cell, the vibe. For the past couple of years, WWE Hell in a Cell has been a bit of a manufactured kind of thing. It has been at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, which kind of made the match redundant and made it feel less special. But these two, with what they did in that match, brought it back. And as someone who was there in Atlanta, Georgia, witnessing this live, I can honestly tell you, from the toolbox spots to the amount of blood we saw, this was exactly what this needed to be. It was a blow-off to the best rivalry that WWE had all year, and it was something that proved that both CM Punk and Drew McIntyre are arguably 2 of the best in the entire business. Go watch this match. There's not much more I can honestly say. And now, there's a lot I can say about this match, because as brutal and as vicious as the rivalry between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk was, you could argue that the feud and rivalry between Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland was even more. These two have had insane chemistry ever since they first stepped foot in the ring with each other in that promo in September of 2023. And ever since then, they have been destined to fight forever. And their match at All Out 2024 proved that. The culmination of a year-long story that was basically Hangman Page cannot beat Swerve Strickland. And the longer it went on, the more popular Swerve Strickland got, the more hateful and resentful Hangman Page got. Because his obsession became not only defeating Swerve Strickland, but teaching the fans a lesson. And the way that these two told this story, from Hangman burning down Swerve Strickland's house to the facial cues that Swerve Strickland had in this match, to just everything about the vibe and what we expected. A lights out steel cage match, something we had never seen before in AEW, was truly left us all bewildered. Spots on concrete, I don't even know what to call that thing. Spots on with hypodermic needles, and finally Hangman Page ending it with a kill shot, the kill shot of professional wrestling, an unprotected steel chair shot to the head. Obviously, it was worked in real life to kind of avoid some of the ramifications that come with real steel chair shots to the head. However, it did not make it any less gruesome. So gruesome, in fact, that AEW has not shown it on their live broadcast. Instead, they cut away to a wide shot, so the impact was seen less. But if you're like me and you were there in person, it shocked everyone in the arena, and it was the perfect end to this saga of arguably one of the best feuds in all of professional wrestling history. Now we move on from one feud to just spectacle in the ring. Bryan Danielson versus Will Osprey is next on our list, and by God, from the moment that Bryan Danielson interrupted Will Osprey in that collision show leading up to AEW Dynasty in April of 2024, everyone was absolutely glued to the screen to see what would happen. And what we got in this match was precisely what we expected. Bryan Danielson was noticeably a lot slower than he had been in the last couple of years, but it didn't stop him from going full force in this match. He promised even beforehand that he was going to do as much as he possibly could do to have this match live up to expectations, and somehow, some way, this match even absolutely eclipsed anything that we could have imagined. This match was truly something out of a comic book, with the ending sequence being so poetic. Bryan Danielson, one corner, Osprey in another corner, them running at each other, and Osprey beating Danielson to the punch. Before Danielson can hit the knee, Osprey was able to hit the hidden blade, and then followed it up with a Tiger Driver 91, a move that he had then banned right after that match because of the damage it ended up doing to Bryan Danielson. Storytelling was there, the pieces moving forward were there, and the match in the ring is, again, as someone who was there live, bit of a running trend, I know, I will never forget that moment. We now move on to another Bryan Danielson classic. Bryan Danielson, Swerve Strickland, AEW World Championship on the line, all in Wembley Stadium. And I will be honest, I tried to be as objective as I possibly could in this list. However, it is very hard to be objective when you are dealing with things that require inobjectivity and subjectivity when you're talking about opinions of wrestling. However, I did my best to take my own bias out of it. If I was to put this list, every single match would be a Bryan Danielson match. However, it is not. But looking just at the story that was told, the in-ring action, and what we saw before us, I don't think that there's a doubt that what happened at All In 2024 was special. The final countdown of the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. If he lost, he would retire forever. He would no longer wrestle in AEW, and he would move on with his career. Swerve Strickland, coming into it, was the most dominant world champion that AEW had seen in a while. That being someone who felt like he belonged at the top of the food chain. While MJF was the world champion for over a year, it was really only the first 6 months of that title reign which were really marred with the idea that MJF was like the best wrestler in the world, and some of his feuds didn't hit. With Swerve Strickland, on the other hand, it was from April until September, non-stop heat. Every single match, every single feud that he had was absolutely hitting, and he was beating some of the best in all of AEW. And going into this match, fresh off a win versus Will Osprey at Forbidden Door, it seemed like Swerve Strickland, was going to do just that one more time. But in the end, that's not what happened. The story that was told was that of Bryan Danielson being beaten down by Swerve Strickland. The old veteran looking over at his children in the crowd and saying, "I'm sorry," only to have Swerve Strickland go and berate his children, at which point the next Hulk up that Bryan did, looking at his children again, saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. In my opinion, the greatest babyface Hulk up spot I've ever seen. And Bryan Danielson once again beating the odds in the main event of a major stadium show for the World Championship while Final Countdown plays. Oh my goodness, there's so much I could say about this match. I mean, it is my favorite wrestling match of all time. I'll just go out and say it. And will always say this. After being there at Wembley Stadium 2024, I am a changed man after having witnessed this match. That's how much it meant to me personally. And regardless of my personal views, it does belong on this list. Another match that belongs on this list is arguably probably the best thing that AEW has ever produced, that being Sting's last match. Sting, Darby Allin versus the Young Bucks at Revolution 2024. A match that was made to pay tribute to Sting. A sold-out 16,000 plus in the Greensboro Coliseum in North Carolina. We're all there to witness the spectacle, the pageantry, and the sadness that was the end of the icon. And from the opening promo package of Sting looking back at pictures of his career, to his sons coming out to celebrate with him, to that insane Darby Allin glass spot that which left Sting by himself for the majority of the match, beating the odds and making Matthew Jackson tap out. This was a truly special affair. And if you were a fan of pro wrestling, and if you were especially a fan of the history of professional wrestling, this match hits you different. And that's why it belongs at least number 2 on this list. You could argue number 1, but I have saved another one for number 1. That being Will Osprey, Swerve Strickland, AEW Forbidden Door 2024. The two best wrestlers in 2024, and arguably the two best, with the two best stories going into this match. Swerve, that being of a world champion that is fighting every challenger before him, that is trying to prove himself. And then Osprey being the guy who had everything behind him. He had the company behind him, the momentum, the fans. There was so much that told you that Will Osprey should win this match. And conventional wisdom going into Forbidden Door would tell you Will Osprey walks out of this match as the winner. You had the fact that they were going to fight at All In, that there was going to be that pay-per-view in London, and that it would make sense for Will Osprey to be the champion going into that match. However, that's not what happened. Swerve Strickland won. And in doing that, he proved that he was the best. And on the way there, this was truly one of the best matches I've ever seen. It was the best match of 2024. From Swerve stomps into the table to Osprey trying, after being beaten down to a pulp, trying to hit that hidden blade at the end, only to fall into the arms of Swerve Strickland. And Swerve and Osprey, two men who have done battle many times before, looking at each other. Swerve patting Osprey on the head, only to hit another house call. And then big pressure, 1, 2, 3, and Swerve retained. This match is so important on so many levels, besides the in-ring action, the story, and everything. You had Osprey coming into the match who had just lost his grandmother and was very emotional going into it, and even paid tribute to Hayabusa, another legend of Japanese pro wrestling. And you had Swerve being introduced with the leading member of Dipset. You had so much there. Jim Jones introducing Swerve. It's crazy. And by the end of it, Swerve was even bigger than he was going into it, which was not the effect that people would conventionally have about this. So, in my view, this was the best match of 2024. And I know I'm going to have disagreed with a lot of you, and a lot of you are going to have disagreed with me. So I want to hear from you guys. What are your top 10 matches of 2024? You don't have to agree with me. 1, I'm just giving my opinion. And 2, who knows? Yours might be better. So let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this list, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, also be sure to give it a thumbs up, because we're trying to be nice to end the new year. Also, be sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, keep it real.